Why, O Lord, do you stand far off? Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble? In his arrogance, the wicked man hunts down the weak, who are caught in the schemes he devises. He boasts of the cravings of his heart. He blesses the greedy and reviles the Lord. In his pride, the wicked does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. His ways are always prosperous. He is haughty, and your laws are far from him. He sneers at all his enemies. He says to himself, "Nothing will shake me. I'll always be happy and never have trouble." His mouth is full of curses and lies and threats. Trouble and evil are under his tongue. He lies in wait near the villages. From ambush, he murders the innocent, watching in secret for his victims. He lies in wait for a lion in cover. He lies in wait to catch the helpless. He catches the helpless and drags them off in his net. His victims are crushed. They collapse. They fall under his strength. He says to himself, "God has forgotten." He covers his face and never sees. Arise, Lord. Lift up your hand, O God. Do not forget the helpless. Why does the wicked man revile God? Why does he say to himself, "He won't call me to account"? But you, O God, do see trouble and grief. You consider it to take it in hand. The victim commits himself to you. You are the helper of the fatherless. Break the arm of the wicked and evil man. Call him to account for his wickedness that would never be found out. The Lord is king forever and ever. The nations will perish from his land. You hear, O God, the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them and you listen to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed, in order that man, who is of the earth, may terrify no more. It's not uncommon at all to hear the words, "Where are the police?" when the lawless ravage communities and cities throughout the world. Sadly, even when catastrophic disasters occur, lawless mobs steal from victims, loot shops, and other businesses, and they destroy property. Often, when people see the horrific acts of evildoers upon innocent people, they wonder, where is God? Why doesn't he do something? Why does he allow this to continue? Well, these questions are actually asked by David in the 10th Psalm. Now, David's questions remain unanswered at the end of the psalm, as they do today. Psalm 10 teaches us how to deal with God's silence and also his delayed justice. A basic question of life, often heard, is, why does God seem so far off in times of trouble, in evil and in wickedness? Well, Psalms 10 is the second of 9 psalms in which the psalmist actually asks God why. Now, the question is a bold expression of the true feelings of oppressed people who cry out for help. In verse 1, David's questions are based on appearance or how things seem to be. It appears that God is ignoring the wickedness taking place within the nation. It appears that the Lord is idly standing rather than acting. He far off, all right, or intentionally distancing himself from the oppressive activity of the wicked, and or hiding himself so that he cannot be found in the midst of trouble. Well, folks, it is not always wrong to question the Lord, all right? In fact, God invites us to question him, to ask him for wisdom to understand the trouble that we face in our lives and in our world. However, as I have stated in the past, we are commanded to always ask in faith, never in doubt. All right. Any question that is not of faith, a question that challenges whether God is acting consistency with his character and his word, is a sinful question. As we question God, we must remember two truths. First, things are not always as they appear. All right. It may appear that God is doing nothing to help you, to help us. It may appear that he has distanced himself from us and that he is hiding from us and that he does not care. We do not and cannot see everything that is going on around us nor above us. We do not have all the information as to what God is doing. All right, just because we cannot see him at work does not mean that God is doing nothing. Second, and surprise, surprise, God is not accountable to us. All right, he is God. We are not. We are the creatures, not the creator. God is greater, exceedingly wiser, and far more powerful than we are. Therefore, he is not obligated to explain anything to us. He is wise and powerful, far beyond our understanding. When he chooses to be silent, we must trust him and the promises and teachings of his word. God is sometimes blamed for the troubles in this world. Some people become upset, even bitter at God, because he did not prevent some tragedy from occurring to them or a loved one. But, folks, God is not responsible for the rampant evil and injustice that frequently seem to prevail. All right? Wicked people, people who follow the impulses of their fallen nature and the influences of satanic forces, are the source of violence and oppression. Now, verse 2 tells us that pride was the original sin against the Lord. Lucifer, Satan, the highest archangel created by God, had a deep desire to exalt himself over God. Pride is first on God's list of abominations or sins that he passionately hates. All right, pride is the root of most sins against other people. The wicked have inflated opinions of themselves, and they do whatever is necessary to satisfy themselves at the expense of others. Plotting and scheming to find ways to exploit other people, they especially prey on those who are weaker than they, those who do not have the resources to defend themselves. Well, David prayed that the wicked would be caught in their own schemes, that the evil that they planned for others would come upon them instead. Now, in verse 3, we see people who exploit others are often proud of their selfish, sinful desires and shamelessly boast of their wicked deeds. They actually admire and look up to those whose hearts are greedy just like theirs. You know, they salute and study the ways of those who are most successful in taking what belongs to others for themselves. They glory in the very activities the Lord deeply despises. Then in verse 4, it confirms that pride is not only exalting self above God and his commands, it also completely ignoring God, all right, acting as if he does not exist. Well, every person knows within themselves, that there is a God, okay? According to the Bible, an honest atheist does not exist. Every individual who denies the existence of God lies against what God has revealed to them deep inside. The sin of the wicked is that they do not respond to that revelation. They do not seek to know the God who has been revealed within the inner recesses of their hearts. there is no room for God in their lives. So, as a result, they reach the full potential of their sinfulness. They become wicked abusers of others. Verse 5 shows us that the wicked person is firm in their pride and disregard for God and his commands. In fact, the words your laws may refer to God's divine laws that govern the human race, which are overlooked by the wicked. Or it may refer to God's judgment upon the wicked person, which they seemingly never see. It appears that they continue unchecked in their evil ways and sneers in contempt upon all who try to stand up to them. Now, verse 6 in the Psalms shows us that the wicked are confident in their continued success. They are convinced that they cannot be brought down. God has promised that they will not be moved. Looking at verse 7, the blackness of the wicked person's heart spews out their mouth. In fact, 5 evils that are arrogantly and contemptually voices are cursing. All right, they swear oaths or make promises that they have no intention of keeping. There's deceit, craftiness, guile, treachery. This is the word used of the Antichrist's dishonest dealings. Then there's fraud, threats, and imitation used to force others to give them their way. Oppression, mischief, trouble, and grievous toll directed at others. And last but not least is vanity or evil. Now, in the next few verses, we see that David used 2 familiar images to depict the threat of evildoers. First, they are like a lion waiting to pounce upon its prey. They sit in the shadows where they wait to seize innocent victims in their mighty jaws and drag them back to their dens where they will secretly devour them, spying on the helpless from behind the bushes. They patiently wait until they are most vulnerable to attack. And then second, they are like hunters, all right? They spread their nets, bait them, disguise them, and wait for the innocent to fall into them. If you don't believe me, well then picture all the dishonest financial schemes directed towards the naive, greedy, and desperate in our world today. All right, picture the attempts of the substance industries. I'm talking about tobacco, alcohol, illegal drug dealing, to trap people by causing them to become addicted to their harmful products. Picture the pornography and sex industries, which prey upon sinful lust and upon those involved in unfulfilling relationships. Picture the deception of materialism and the advertising industry. I mean, again and again, the weak fall into their traps. Now, verse 11, we find that Satan is the master of deception. And like the naive who fall for the wicked per schemes, the wicked person themselves have fallen into Satan's snare. Because they don't experience immediate retribution, they think that God has overlooked their evil deeds and is not going to hold them accountable. Now, God's warnings of judgment are meaningless to them because they are not instantly carried out. Example would be the trick that Satan used against Eve. He tempted her to ignore God's threat of judgment. Furthermore, the wicked person thinks that they can conceal their evil deeds from God, that God will not see them. They proudly overlook the fact that God sees and knows all. Well, friends, pride is prone to rear its ugly head even within the hearts of believers. Sinful attitudes that characterize those who have plunged into the depths of wickedness can creep into the lives of believers as well. I mean, look into the mirror and examine yourself for selfishness, arrogance, a sense of uh, of superiority over others. All right, check for taking advantage of others, boasting of things that actually displease the Lord, about admiring celebrities or the rich who have prospered through sinful means. Check yourself for ignoring the presence of God, acting as if God does not see you. Look for a false sense of security, deceptive, dishonest speech, and or believing that you will get by with sin. It is easy and very natural for us as believers to become frustrated at the success of evildoers and the plight of the oppressed. Now, what are we to do? How can we handle the frustration of the unanswered questions of God's silence and delayed justice? Well, that's a great question. And for the answers, let's look at the rest of the psalm. In verse 12, David abruptly transitioned from discussing the ways of the wicked to directly addressing God. He called upon the Lord to intervene immediately, all right, to stop the wicked in their tracks and to liberate the persecuted from their bondage. First, he cried out to God to arise, to no longer sit passively by, but to spring into action. Second, he asked the Lord to lift up his hand against the wicked. This means to challenge or mount in opposition against. All right. Now, third, David called upon the Lord to give his attention to the humble, those who are depressed and beaten down from abuse and mistreatment. The just God must not be oblivious to their condition. In verse 13, it shows us that it can be difficult for believers to fathom how people can ignore God and scoff at his warning of judgment. A true believer, such as David, knows the Lord, the true and living God. Therefore, it is beyond comprehension that people boldly laugh in the face of God, mock him and his power, challenge his righteous character and his commitment to justice, and or view the warnings of judgment as empty threats. In verse 14, David affirmed his confidence in what he knew to be true of God. See, the brash, shameless persistence of the wicked had not shaken his faith. To the contrary, it prompted him to declare four facts about God in relation to the wicked and their victims. And I want you to note that David is not rising up in defense of God. All right, the Lord does not need people to defend him, but in response to his own questions. God does see every effort of evildoers. All right, not one thought, word, or deed escapes his knowledge. He considers, looks intently upon, and carefully regards every sin the wicked commit against others. God does raise his hand in retribution against the wicked. All right? God can be trusted to vindicate the poor and helpless and to judge their oppressors. He hears their cries. He knows their grief. He feels their pain. And God does rise to the defense of the fatherless. All right, orphans were commonly abused by the wicked because they had nobody to defend them. They, along with widows, were easy prey for oppressors. Verse 15 tells us that a person who has a broken arm is powerless to strike another. David's call for God to break the arm of the wicked man was a call to render him powerless so that he could not continue to persecute others. See, he wanted God to examine every single deed the wicked man had committed against others, to hold him accountable and to judge him for every evil inflicted until there was nothing left on his account to further judge. David wanted God to prove to the wicked man that not one offense had escaped his attention. In verse 16, with unshaken confidence, David declared that God is the supreme ruler of the earth. All right? He will never be overthrown. He will reign throughout eternity. Every acre of the earth belongs to him. I mean, it is his land. And all who refuse to acknowledge him will be erased from the face of the earth. In verse 17, we read that David knew the Lord, and he was sure that God had heard, listened attentively to, and heeded the cry of the afflicted for justice, that he would lift them from their depression, strengthen them, and mend their broken hearts, that he would bend his ear to hear their cry of pain and every call for justice. And then in verse 18, David concludes this psalm with a version of the future when God finally judges the wicked and eternally establishes righteousness upon the earth. The orphans and those crushed beneath the weight of oppression will receive the justice for which they have so desperately longed. All right? God will not allow the wicked to continue forever. Their reign of terror will one day come to an eternal end. Whew, what a great psalm, right? Brothers and sisters, the answer to the frustrating question of God's silence and delayed justice is not in explanation, but in exhortation. All right? Have faith in God. Remind yourself of his character and his promises. Review history and see where he has moved according to his schedule, not ours. All right? In his own time, he has intervened and destroyed evildoers. Every tyrant on earth has eventually been stopped, and they will eternally endure the just punishment for their crimes. Remember that every case in God's courtroom is not tried immediately. Every offender is not instantly apprehended and sentenced, but not one slips through the cracks. All right, every case will be ruled upon until God's docket is eternally cleared and justice is forever done. Why? Well, because of who God is. He is just. He is righteous. He is a defender and friend of the weak and the helpless. And for that and so much more, I say praise be to God. If you enjoyed this message, I pray that it really reached you well and that you'll want to share it with others, because honestly, you never know who needs to hear God's word today. God bless. I love you. And thanks for watching.